morning, Houston. Good morning. How y'all doing? Do you say that here?
Yeah.
Y'all?
Yeah.
Do you say that? Did I say it right? Cat's trying to teach me. So Scott, thank you for that, and right back at you, because you know, we're in touch with a lot of cities, a lot of communities across the country, and I don't know that there are many of them that have this level of demonstrable community, educator, business foundation involvement and connection with each other. And you've got a really live conversation going here about the future of the public schools in the Houston area, and that's a really, really great thing to see. So thank you. And Museum of Fine Arts, so great for you to open up your fantastic facility to all this. My wife is an artist and a gardener, and my daughter, youngest of 3 daughters, is 1 week away, 2 weeks away from graduating from her 5-year MFA program in teaching at BU. She's going to be an art teacher. And they're both insanely jealous that I'm here in this building today, because they've never been here. So, there are 2 other reasons why, along with all that, I'm glad to be here. One is that I was introduced this morning to Shipley's Donut Holes. Cat. And the other I'll get into in just a second. But first, this picture, I'm guessing that a lot of you are thinking, oh, isn't that nice? He's got all these pictures of all their grantee schools, and he's probably like full of wonderful pictures of really cute kids, like this one. And that some of you may have been thinking, you know, this is cool. He's got, you know, their future pathways and stuff, but it's a little disappointing that he puts teacher by the African-American girl. Isn't that kind of playing the stereotype? And, you know, couldn't we have done better than that? So if that's the case and that's what you were thinking, then that means I gotcha, because these roles here are not actually designed to express what they might be when they grow up. These are roles that these kids are playing right now in their schools, and they self-identify as these things. The scientist, the engineer, the innovator. And the one who sort of holds herself a little bit like a leader in this group, she's the teacher. And in that environment, in the kinds of schools that we're working towards today, you know, teacher is at least, if not more, as exalted and respected a position as the other 3. And in some ways, that's sort of a capsule summary of where we want to go, I think, with all this. When these kids have kids and their kids are going to school, let's all hope that that the phrase teacher evokes as much respect as the other labels listed here. And if we have done that by the time their kids grow up and start going to school, then we'll have done something important. Let me just see a show of hands. How many are teachers in this room this morning? Great, good. And others are interested community members? Raise your hands. Yeah, good. Business foundation people? Yeah, okay. Other categories I'm missing? Yell something out.
School board members.
School board member.
Former teacher.
Former teachers. Students. Are there any students? Okay, we got one. Let's hear it for the students sitting in the back. So here's the other reason why I'm really glad to be here. I come from Boston. You may have read about what happened to us this winter. What you're not seeing here are the about 12 granite steps in front of that door. So this is about 8 feet of snow or so in front of our house. That's the backyard. You're not seeing the grill, the picnic table, or the neighbor's BMW underneath all that snow. This is me trying to carve out a driveway in the middle of the night, in the middle of a blizzard. You know, this is our kitchen window. Yeah, I know. So you feel pretty good about where you this last winter. And you're welcome to come visit us in July when it starts turning on you around here. But today we're going to talk about leaving the bubble behind, understanding personalized learning. A lot of what I'm going to describe has its basis in the thoughts that Paul Tough expressed in this book. Some of you have read this book, probably, yeah? And a lot of it is about this understanding that we're increasingly, I think, holding together. That schools, have been assigned and have done a pretty good job of helping kids collect and absorb content. And to be, proficient on various assessments of how well they learn that content. But that we're not placing high enough value on this other side of what schools can do and what schools need to help do, especially for kids who are coming from challenging backgrounds. So a lot of our grantees, the schools that you'll be hearing about today, subscribe to and drive a lot of their inspiration from the research of guys like Paul Tough. In good next-gen learning fashion, I'm going to put you to work, though, because in a next-gen learning classroom, nobody's a spectator. All right. So this is one of the things that my wife and I did to leave the snow behind us was to go to Savannah, Georgia. This is just a couple weeks ago. Yes, there was still a lot of snow. And so one of the players in this new sport that we encountered is me. I won't tell you which one, but take a look at this. This is variously called Savannah Battle Ball or Bubble Soccer. And I can tell you that the soccer is only the tiniest part of it. Most of it is just really all around, bouncing around in these big plastic balls and feeling curiously invulnerable, because you can get whacked and sent 10 feet that way and then you bounce right back up again. It's kind of a cool design for a sport. So I left that and thought, this is so great. And we got these little videos now, and there's a metaphor here for something having to do with school reform and the future of education in the United States. Beats the heck out of me what that is. So that's our job collectively today, all right? I want you all, as we have this conversation about what schools are starting to look like, to think about this little video. We'll come back to it at the end. And then we'll have a little conversation at the end about how we can connect the two things, because I just loved doing this so much. I've told our staff we're going to just keep using this video over and over again, especially as soon as we can find the right metaphor to use for it. Okay? That's your job. So this is who we are with respect to this particular slice of our work. We're in this for about 7 years, nearly $50 million. A lot of it from the Gates Foundation, some from Dell, right here in Texas, some from Broad, and from other local foundations. All about not just optimizing the performance of the current system, but just stepping back and doing a big rethink and reimagine. So most of you are familiar with this innovation adoption curve, where it starts with the innovators who are doing that work, reinventing, recreating, rethinking the whole thing. And then some of that starts to move into the folks who may not be the first ones to break all the eggs and start things over, but they're the early adopters. And then it starts to move into early majority, late majority, and what this researcher anyway calls the laggards. Nobody can come up with really the right name for that group, but laggard seems to work. So this is what we're doing. We're developing this new model base of the innovators. We're also doing a bunch of work to try to help connect into the work of the early adopters and early majority. You guys here in Houston are also developing new models. I was at one yesterday, the Museum Academy. That was just incredibly great to see, and I'm going to carry back lots of stories from it to our other grantees. And this is what you are all part of. This is a map of just those schools nationally that we have helped to support and catalyze. Actually, within the next 2 or 3 weeks, courtesy of 6 regional incubator funds that we're working with, we're going to announce about 70 more schools. So this map is going to start to look very, very crowded. All of them have responded to an RFP that is organized around these 3 clusters of criteria: high expectations, and not just for proficiency on English and math, but for a deep definition, we'll talk about that a little bit later, of college and career readiness. Relentlessly personalized learning for students, we'll talk about that too. And optimized for scale, so that these schools don't simply serve the 400 kids that they're serving, but that there's impacts and ripples that go beyond. These are the 6 regional funds that we're working with in 6 sites around the country. And they're basically in the act of proving right now that the early majority is ready to stand up, and the early adopters are ready to stand up and move here, because they're reaching into their school districts, DC, Chicago, Oakland, and finding people who are ready to learn from the pioneering models and create more schools just like this. So there's, I mean, I don't know why this metaphor keeps coming to mind, but there is a snowball that is just, you know, starting to form and roll, and it's gonna go somewhere. We have focused on that unit of change, the school itself, because we're convinced, and we think we're being reinforced in this by what we're seeing among our grantee schools, that this is not something that you can do as a project. You can't, you know, reinvent your curriculum without also reinventing the roles that you assign to teachers and students. And you can't reinvent your definition of success without reinventing the ways that you're assessing student progress against that definition. So you kind of got to do all these things at once: the defining, the measuring, the designing, the implementing, and then the enabling and scaling. I'm not going to go through all this, but there's a lot of material on our website, nextgenlearning.org, that you can go to and find more stuff on this, and we'll make sure that these guys have this deck if anyone wants it, so you can spend more time on some of these slides. But for now, I'm going to ask you to just turn to someone near you, and if you're not near someone, have a conversation with yourself. But ask yourself, what was your most valuable and enduring learning experience during your high school years? It doesn't mean that it has to happen in high school. It could have happened anywhere. But just take a moment right now to dial back, and as soon as you come up with something, turn to your neighbor and just tell your neighbor what that was. Take about 30 seconds to do that, and then swap and have the neighbor do it too. If some of you haven't had a chance to say your story, go ahead and flip and have the other one tell the other story. Give it another half of it. Let's come on back. So, just curious, more show of hands. For how many of you said, say, Algebra 2, or some other specific course, academic course? Great. How many of you chose one particular fantastic, inspiring teacher? Look at that. How many of you chose an extracurricular activity that you did in high school? Yeah, okay. And how many was it outside of high school? Good, a whole mix. This is great. Well, so I'm going to recognize Larry Rosenstock, who is the guy who has done this a lot. He says he's done it about 200 times. He's the founder of High Tech High in San Diego, which some of you may be familiar with, and we're going to talk a little bit more about High Tech High later. When people hire him to go out and help them figure out how to become more like High Tech High, that's what he does. And generally speaking, the vast majority of the room is choosing either a dedicated teacher or an extracurricular activity or something outside of high school that is very experiential, very student driven and oriented. And he says to them, okay, we're going to spend the rest of the day designing school around that kind of learning, because why wouldn't we? And they do. And then by the end of the day, they've all basically created High Tech High, and he hasn't used the words High Tech High once, which is sort of how High Tech High operates. These guys we were talking out here, and they asked me what mine was. Mine was operating a business. A bunch of friends of mine and I created Better Butlers Inc. And leave the dishes to us, which was on a business card. Anyway, so thank you for all that. And I'm now going to jump into some of our grantees, and I'm gonna tell their stories by telling you stories about them. This story comes from Design Tech High School. It's in the Bay Area. This is Sarah. We'll call her Sarah. I'm changing some names. But she and all her classmates showed up on the very first day of Design Tech's existence last fall. It's a brand new school. And were surprised to find that there was nothing in the school. There was no furniture, there were no materials, no nothing, which was a surprise to them. And to their parents, as you can imagine. And the school explained to them that, this is all part of the way the school is going to operate. We're going to co-design, co-construct our environment here, and you're going to be part of that conversation and drive a lot of it. And so they did. They chose all the furniture, they chose the layouts, they chose a lot of the materials. They basically, were given the keys to help invent the whole school. And then they periodically, every 3 months or so, do what they call a remix, where they go back to their original design principles that they all worked out and look at how it has all played out, and they do some rapid iterating and correct some of what they saw didn't work. This is actually one of the remixes last fall, where they decided to revise some of the furniture that they had designed and built for the school. They redesigned all the signage around the school. They repositioned all the whiteboards, which had been portable before, and then they decided that was too much trouble, so they put them on the walls. Basically, the kids are being put in charge, along with the professionals at the school, of figuring out how to design and execute their own learning environment. That was the sort of founding idea of that particular school. In doing so, they're reflecting what we're calling the My Ways 4 areas of competencies for success in college, career, and life. They weren't using this particular model, but they've helped to contribute to it. All of our grantees have said different versions of the same thing to us, which is, we're spending every day and every minute of every day helping our kids develop this much broader, richer, deeper set of skills than what's represented by proficiency on English and math tests. As important as that is, but we're not entirely sure that that's the most important thing. And so they asked us to do this project, which was to look at all of the definitions of that kind of success that are out there. There are a bunch of them. And try to come up with a synthesis for them. Don't come up with a new sort of competitive entry, but try to come up with something that will help create a kind of an interoperable model that can connect all of these other definitions, so that we're all starting to use some of the same language. So content knowledge, that's knowing. Creative know-how, that's knowing how. Habits of success is all the sort of student agency being sorts of behaviors. And then we're proposing that wayfinding is also deeply important, especially for kids who are coming from disadvantaged backgrounds and they're not getting that kind of landscape mapping sort of skill set outside of school. So we're going to be releasing this later this spring publicly. It's just going to be given away. That little diagram there is the state of New Hampshire. They're adopting it statewide as part of their whole system of next-gen learning support. And we're providing along with it a whole set of tools Again, this is all fueled by our conversations with our grantees, designed to help that broader, richer success definition be activated in the life of the school. So we all know a kid like this. Let's say that it's Sarah back at Design Tech. That she's never really quite been pushed. She's kind of gets by because she's gifted socially. So here's a graphical depiction of her success plan, her IEP. Right? She comes to the school as the black line in the middle, strong in some places, weaker in some others, just hasn't attended at all in wayfinding. And together she comes up with the plan for the minimum set of attainments that she wants to get to across that whole set of competencies. All this is being done, in order to ensure that the whole school, the student, her family, understand and buy into the whole complete set of competencies that we think and our grantees are thinking are necessary for students to develop in order for them to be successful at what happens next. So this is Alex at Summit Public Schools. Some of you may be familiar with them. They're also in the Bay Area. They're an example of a group of our grantees that are all in the same category. These are very, very successful, no excuses charter organizations. Summit, Aspire, KIP are all in that category. They have outperformed their peers and districts nationally by sometimes staggering amounts in terms of helping their kids do well on the standard metrics of the day and get into college. They've been around long enough that now they've been able to track how their kids have done in college, and their kids do better than everybody else. 50% of them actually earn a degree within 6 years, a 4-year degree. But they look at that and say, only 50%, we failed. Let's rip up our model and start all over again. So they're using NGLC funds to create their 2.0 model. So Summit's model has been around now for, this is really their second complete year of their deep dive into it. And they've gone pretty far, and I'm going to show you some of what they've produced. But the beginning was rocky, and they said it was rocky because everybody in the whole school had to unlearn everything that they had come to know about what school looks like, and how it should work. So Alex, this is not Alex, but let's just call him Alex, is the story that Diane Tavener, the head of Summit, likes to tell. And was an example of a kid who, had just floated along the sort of curricular tide for his whole 9 years in public schools, and had never really understood that, he needed to play a really active role in making this happen in a meaningful way. And so as everybody around him was starting to activate their own sort of personal pathways and buy into the notion that the kids were in part managing their own learning processes, he wasn't catching that, and he just sat basically for a month and a half, not doing a whole lot. And the faculty had, practically fist fights over what to do with this kid, because half of them were saying, "We can't let this happen. We have to help this kid be successful," and the other half were saying, "That's what we did, in our 1.0 model." And Alex is the kind of guy who's gonna allow us to do all the work for him, and then go to college and not have the agency and the self-efficacy and management skills to be able to deal with it once he's gone from our cocoon. And so they didn't. And after a month and a half, he caught the hand of a passing teacher and said, "I think I'm supposed to be doing something." And boom, the light bulb, and so that could be the most important moment of this kid's life, Who knows how that story will turn out. And I've told Diane, I want her to track him particularly closely, just so we see how the story turns out. He's a senior there right now. But that's the point of their new model. They're trying to enlist all their kids in becoming part owners and partners in their own learning. And after all, is it really learning if they're not? I'm not sure that it is. So we had this sort of Tower of Babel problem in education. And you've all used different versions of these or other labels. They all kind of overlap a bit with each other. They kind of contradict a little bit with each other. They're all over the place. This is actually from a blog that I wrote that's on our website if you want to read the whole thing. But this is the heart of that blog. Our grantees are doing work that's up there in quadrant 4, up in the upper right. They are stretching time and pace, going out the x-axis, usually with digital learning kinds of supports, so flipped classrooms and all of that sort of stuff, where kids are learning content outside of school, and then when they're together expensively with buses and whatever else, that's when they're doing really, really collaborative work together and in teams and lots of different learning modalities. And then on the y-axis, that's individualized, competency-based, personalized stretching. So that's where, say, big picture kinds of schools are. And our schools are basically trying to do them both. They're trying to do the personalized stuff because that's their philosophy of learning, and they're trying to use digital technology in order for this to happen affordably and in a scalable way so that all this can travel across the country. The Summit website, which is summitps.org, has everything on it you could ever want to see. Their whole method of world changing is to just give away everything that they're doing. So I encourage you to go there. This is one of the pages there, Day in the Life of a Summit student. And you'll see, there's lots of different modalities that are happening all day long at this school. They're all oriented around individualized, personal pathways. So every student's experience of a day is different and singular to himself or herself, and it's all been tuned around what he or she needs to be doing to proceed along the learning pathways that they have outlined. This is their 4 elements of readiness. They look very close to ours. This is just a sample of the build out that they do to try to create a basis for the work that happens in the classroom. I think a lot of Montessori classrooms want to go to Summit because there's this sort of organized chaos kind of feel to it, with all the students doing a lot of their own work and teamwork, project work during the day. But underneath it is this incredible amount of engineering and design work. How many have been in a Montessori classroom? Yeah, okay, so you know what I'm talking about. And all that is a little bit invisible to the students, but it's all there. We're going to have a test on all this later. So just pay attention to that. This is how they're defining some of their whole rubric for self-awareness and self-management, habits of success. These are the maps that they're creating for the different learning modalities that happen in their schools. So that's Summit. The high-tech high story is not really about kids, it's about adults. 3 or 4 weeks ago, I led a bunch of our grantees in a site visit to high-tech high. So they're all people like Summit and others, busily creating their own versions of what high-tech high has been doing. High-tech high, though, kind of stumped them a bit. Here's a school that's been around for 15 years. These are the kind of results they're getting. And when they describe what their school is all about, they can do it in the simplest and most elegant of terms. They say, we're really about 3 things. We're about really rich, relentlessly experiential project-based learning. That's how everything happens here. We're about hiring the absolute best, most committed and engaging and inspired faculty that we can. And we set them free, the faculty. we don't really have a curriculum. You know, we have a pedagogy. We have some ideas about that. But frankly, we would really not enslave our physics teachers to the curriculum coming out of Sacramento that says, you know, in order to be understood to have passed the physics requirement, you need to learn, you know, a half an inch at each of the 28 different physics subdomains. We'd rather have the teacher share some of his or her incredible passion for the physics of roller coasters, you know, get kids excited in that way, then have the kids start coming up with their own projects and just go to town with it. That's what they want. And here are the results they're getting. I mean, pretty amazing, especially 86%, nearly 90% of high-tech graduates have either graduated from college or are still in, making their way through. That includes all of their students, including the kids of color and the kids from poverty, which is a considerable percentage of that school. So they have a track record to show for a fairly simple kind of approach. And it made all of our grantees sit there and say, well, gosh, you know, maybe we're just overcomplicating this. You know, we're creating all these systems, all this stuff, and really, you know, it can be thought of as a fairly simple sort of thing that starts with engagement and commitment, and then moves through sort of careful shepherding and mentoring by caring teachers. And after that, everything is sort of a detail. This is what it feels like to walk through a high-tech high hallway. Everything you see here is student produced. Everything in every corner of their buildings. There are 9 schools now in the high-tech high cluster. You can go to their website, hightechhigh.org, and see all of their projects, the ones that are underway right now and the ones that have been completed in years past. The right hand, these are all kids' publications that are all semi-professional. This is a robotics thing that the kids were just working on earlier this year. This is a bunch of middle schoolers doing some electronically charged bracelets that then they donate to local charities for fundraisers. All of that work exemplifies this list of attributes of next-gen learning from a student's point of view, which is something that we created with some of our grantees about 3 years ago, deciding that the best way to define what this looks like is to do it from the kid's point of view. And you read that list and how could you argue with any of that stuff? But, it's of most kids in most public schools these days. And there aren't many of those that if we ask the kids, they would check with an enthusiastic yes, I suspect. And that's not an indictment of the current school models. These school models were largely created 80 to 100 years ago, for a different society with different needs, and with different students coming through them. But that has changed, and our schools need to change to match where society has gone. You'll see at nextgenlearning.org lots and lots and lots of other breakthrough models. They're all written about there. They're all profiles of them. There's a really rich set of materials for anybody who wants to do a deep dive and learn about what these schools are doing. We intentionally kept our sort of design principles fairly short and succinct because we wanted them to be free to create the flavor of school that they wanted. And they are a mixture of charters and non-charters. In the announcement in 2 weeks, there are going to be probably 50 more non-charters in this group. I'm going to just really skip lightly on 2 or 3 other ones just to give you another taste. This is a tiny district in rural Alabama, and it's a typical economically disadvantaged district, town. They have collectively chosen to reinvent the entire community with the schools taking the lead. And the school plan to do this involves blowing open the traditional school learning model and coming up with this expression of how kids and adults are going to spend their time. All this sort of played out in the stuff that you'll find on our website and at their website. And you know, this is a tiny community, and they're leading the way in creating a whole new model for how kids experience public school. This one is a brand new school just opened up in San Diego this last fall that is all about maker space and STEM kinds of engineering and design experiences beginning at the level of pre-K. You know, so the kids all spend a big chunk of each week in their tinkering labs making stuff. You know, that's what the school is all about. And this school here does that at the high school level. They're in Philadelphia. This is a regular district school, although they've been granted special charter-like permission to create a different kind of model. This is an example of one of their projects. The kids are creating a healthy food truck for their neighborhood where it's incredibly hard for anybody to go buy healthy food. It's just not available. So, you know, those are all examples of communities, educators like yourselves, community leaders, business leaders, coming together to ask the root questions about what learning should be like in 2015 and how we can design new kinds of schools that embody what we just said about learning. You know, everything that you just came up with, thinking about your own most valuable, enduring life learning experience in high school. You know, that's the same question that they're all asking themselves. And then they're saying, well, why wouldn't we organize a school around those principles? So, okay, so let's come back to our metaphor. The one that I showed you earlier was the first game that I played. This was now the third, and you'll see how we were sort of getting the real point of this game. I won't tell you which one of those was me, but I was one of those too in the middle there. So just let's just give me a few ideas. Who's come up with something that will help me connect that metaphor to school reform and the stories that I was telling you about these schools? Go ahead.
So I was just thinking, if you think of that bubble ball, almost as sort of the habits of success that you're trying the kids to build on.
Yeah.
And so you can almost think of it as like, if you can basically build into that kid a bubble ball around him, which is around his character and his habits of success.
Yeah.
And you can take the ball as his future, like he's constantly moving towards moving his future.
Yeah.
And no matter what comes at him, right, and you can throw curriculum changes, you can throw technology changes, you can throw, I have no idea what I need to teach you now, because whatever I teach you now is not going to be relevant. Now.
Yeah.
He can take that and bounce right back because he has those habits of success.
Ooh, did everybody hear that? Yeah, that's were you taking notes and stuff all the way through while I was talking over there, coming up with that?
I didn't think, by the way.
Well, and I especially love the, bouncing back part, because that's sort of the magic of that game. People can whack you, and it's kind of fun. You don't mind it because you go bouncing and you say, "Oh, I'm going to break 3 ribs and a knee," and you don't do it, and you just come right back. Anybody have another idea, or did you just totally did it for us? So good. So come down afterwards and tell me. Yeah.
I kind of want to focus on the ball.
Yeah.
And the ball never ends up, or the end goal never ends up where you want it to. It kind of just goes out in outer space. I mean, there's absolutely no control.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where reform is.
Sadly, you're right. And in fact, when you're playing the game, you sort of understand that the soccer part is the detail, and so nobody is keeping their eye on the ball. they're all stuck in their own little worlds. You know, so there could be lots of different spins to put on this bubble soccer thing. I like them both, yeah.
Falling down is part of the creative process.
Yeah.
So in the process of children learning,
Yeah.
they're going to fail, and they have to get over the fact that it is a learning opportunity.
Yep.
when they won't.
Yeah. Yeah, and unexpected things happen. You get whacked from a place where you didn't even see it coming from. Are you a teacher? Is that how?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. You sound like it. Kids are lucky
Or
kids.
I would use the opportunity for constructive failure.
Yeah,
That's the Boy Scout training term for it.
Excellent. Oh, good. We'll bring the Scouts into this because we're actually learning a lot from the Scouts with badging as a sort of competency. Yeah.
I think it's interesting that you take a really old game, a game that's been around for a long time, and you add this innovation to it, and it completely changes the game.
Yeah. Ooh, that's nice. Yeah, taking an old idea and kind of reinventing it for modern use. Yeah.
It's taking a collective experience and infusing individual, unique, kind of safe perspectives. So
Yeah.
like each person is really playing their own game. You can't see
Yeah.
more than 10 feet in front of you, but
Yeah. Yeah.
it doesn't really matter because you're enjoying it. You are enjoying it from your own
Yeah.
point of view.
Yeah, you're right. And I, you know, you compare this. I mean, the beauty of real soccer is the flow of the teams and the way they understand each other, and they'll kick the ball. You know, they'll go to where they know the ball is going to go. You know, and in this one, I mean, maybe after the sport has been around for a few years, people will have figured that out. Right now, it looks like, you know, if anybody has coached like 6-year-olds playing soccer, you know, we used to call that herd ball, you know, because they would just run around in little herds, kicking each other in the shin. And then the ball would go over here, and then they'd... Great. Yeah.
Having played this, I think one of the things that's interesting is after you're in there for a little bit in your own bubble, you soon want to escape and be with, because you aren't really with the team all the time.
Yeah.
And so I think from a learning perspective, we have to obviously blend it, you know, make sure we're having that individual, but still part of the group.
Yeah. So you've played this.
Yeah.
You're a professional.
Not at all.
But the video I wish I had come away from Savannah with was when in the middle of our third game, I mean, it was hot, and you get hot inside of those things. You're in a harness holding onto these in handles inside, and somebody just got too hot, and in the middle of the game they just shucked off their ball and ran away. You know? It was like, I'm madder than hell. I can't take it any longer. I'm getting out of this bubble. Boom. So we can stage that. You actually have a whole bubble collection? No? Okay.
You can rent them.
Okay, yeah. Any other last ideas? Good. This is great. Thank you for all of that. We're gonna use it all, and I'll credit you when we do this very moment and last night. So that brings us to the end of the formal part. I think we're going to do some Q&A, but I leave you with this picture because, you know, I part of, especially with all of the teachers here, you know, right now, you know, another ball metaphor is pushing the boulder up the hill, and a lot of today's teachers are feeling like Sisyphus doing that, you know, and you're trying to do the best thing within a system that too often seems not to either enable you to do that or acknowledge it when you do. And so, you know, all of our grantees would say, you know, this isn't about technology. It's not about, you know, fancy new cool looking buildings or anything like that. It's really about, you know, moving from curriculum centered to student centered, and from teaching oriented to learning oriented, and allowing teachers to do, you know, the things that they know are the most valuable and enduring teaching kinds of impacts and experiences that they know are all too rare right now. This is all about making those magical moments that happen once every 2 weeks, happen, like rapid fire, 13 in a day. So thank you for your attention to all this, and I really appreciate your coming.